Hi friends, this is Joy. So this year for 2020, I decided to make a junk journal out of this packaging for my project. And then I have all this mail that I've been collecting that it's like I've been wanting to try to make into a junk journal at one point and just never did. So now is the time. This is what I'm going to do. So I have this packaging and I need to figure out how wide the spine is and how many signatures that I can fit in this packaging. So I believe the spine is like 1 3/4, and so I'm trying to decide, do I want, 2 signatures or 3 signatures in this junk journal. So I'm kind of figuring out, like, if I go 3/4 of an inch from either side of where the bend is, and then divide that in half, that 3 would fit comfortably. Here I'm looking at going every ½ inch, but that would be 5 signatures, and it just seems a little too tight for 5 signatures. Although I guess it depends on how many pages you plan to put in each signature, but then that would require a lot more sewing, when you go to bind it, and I'm like not up with any more sewing than I absolutely have to. So I figured I'd rather do fewer signatures with more pages than more signatures with fewer pages. So like I said, I decided to go 3/4 of an inch from the bend and then split that difference in half and do 3. That seems like, a comfortable and reasonable number of signatures for this cover that I plan to use. So this is a pile of junk mail that I have that I'm going to use to create the pages for this junk journal. And so I need to figure out, to begin with, like, how big is the biggest page that I can put in this junk journal. Here's one that's kind of long that I thought would be fun to like fold towards the middle, and that way you kind of have like an interactive page. So that will be fun. I want to include that in there. And then these big ones, I'm like, well, that's way too big. I could cut them down, but if I fold them in half, it looks like they'd be the perfect size. So I'm cutting those down because, it's a two-fold and then folding it in half. And that way I get 2 pages out of each one of these, which is great because if that's the max size of my pages, then I can use that for the outside of the signatures. So I also have this envelope that I'm like, well, this will be fun too to include. So I'm just figuring out how that's going to fit into this junk journal. And I felt like, it would fit best just folding it in half like I did there. And here's another big one, so that will be my 3rd signature. The paint sample is good as is. I can include that. Here's another envelope I can fold in half, and another envelope, and even another envelope. So I have quite a few of these envelopes that I was able to fold in half and include in the junk journal. So I included 2 envelopes for each signature. Here's another envelope, and I realized that when I put these in the junk journal, I'm going to have some clearance in the middle for the flaps. So I cut the flap in half, and then I cut each side at an angle, and then I cut the outside of the flap at a slight angle just to match. So that way the outside of the flap wasn't like straight and the inside was like at an angle. So I cut both sides at an angle, and I did the same with this. This is another envelope. It had that stickiness on there that they put on mailing, mailers whenever they send them out. So I just cleaned that all off, folded it in half, and then did the same for it. I cut the flap in half, and then I angled it on either side of that cut, and then I angled the outside of the flap to kind of match the angle of the inside. So that'll go in a signature. And then I have this here that I found that I thought, well, I'll, tear this in half and put that in. And then I realized, oh, it's got a gold envelope. How fun is that? So I want to include that in there as well. Hopefully I'll find 3 more. That way I can have one gold envelope in each of the signatures. And so I decided this is going to be able to go in as well. So I do include that. And here I'm just trying to figure out how I want my signatures to go. So I've got, like I said, 2 envelopes for each signature. And then I have 3 of the bigger mailers that I tore in half and then folded in half to include. And here I was going to cut that flap like I did the others, but it was so thin that I thought, well, it doesn't really need to have a flap. I'll just cut it off. And here the flap was so long that it was like more than I needed, so I cut some of that off, and then I trimmed, did it in the middle, and then trimmed off that little bit of extra on either side that didn't need to be there. To me, I didn't know why that was there, but I figured it didn't need to be there, so I cut it off. And so I'm starting to put together the signatures with the bigger outside pieces. Well, one of these I'm using as the outside, and then I'm mix and matching these so that they're, somewhat mixed up. And I use, like I said, this paint sample. So I'm taking the staples out of it so that I can put one in each of my signatures, because there was enough pages in here where I could add one to each signature. So I thought that'll be fun to, decorate whenever I go to decorate these pages. So now I'm trying to figure out, do I have enough pages or can I add more? And I decided that I could add more. So I decided that I was going to do 10 pages for each signature, which folded in half would be 20 pages times 3 signatures would be 60 pages. And then, of course, if you multiply that by 2 for either side, then I have like 120 pages to work on this next year. So this is going to be my 2022 project for the year. And there was another gold envelope, so I was happy to find that. And now I'm hoping that I can find a third one, which I do. So I'm super happy that I was able to find 3 gold envelopes. And here's the third one that I found and included in my signatures. So this is going to be a multi-part video. This is, kind of going through showing how I put my signatures together and figured out what I was going to include in each signature. And there was a lot of smaller, and how, there I'm just kind of organizing and adding to the signatures, and then the gold envelope in the center. And there were some smaller some smaller junk mail things that were like, multi-flaps and triple flaps and stuff that I want to include. But some of them, were kind of small, and I'm like, well, I'll include them, but I won't include them as pages. I'll include them as interactive elements on the pages, potentially, as I go through decorating the pages and having fun in this journal in 2022. So here's another long one. I'm looking for some long ones here because I really like the one where I folded in the pages to make it fit, and I want to include that in my junk journal as well. And so I'm kind of looking for some of those that I can include. But I'm also looking at some of these other smaller ones that is like, man, these would be fun to have in the journal, but they probably will end up more in like pockets, or as in, like I said, an interactive element on a page or something like that. So again, just kind of going through, deciding what else I want to include in this junk journal and in my signatures. So here I have a few more things that I want to add. So I'm adding those into the signatures. A few more mailers, and like I said, I decided I was going to do 10 pages for each signature, and there I felt like that I probably should trim off just a little bit so I have a little bit more clearance there for those pages. And so yeah, so here's my signatures now. You can see how I put them together with the envelopes. That's one signature. And here's where I was like, yeah, I need a little bit more clearance in the middle to, for those flaps so that they don't, have any issues opening and closing once I sew everything in. Here's the second one. And again, I'm just trimming the inside, just shaving a little bit off so that there's a little bit more room there for that flap to open and close. And this is the second signature. That's that one, and again, just trimming a little bit off the inside of that flap. So that's number 2. And I get my circle punch because the ones that don't have a flap, and actually the ones that do have a flap, eventually I do cut a half circle in them. But especially for these that don't have a flap, I felt like needed, like a little half circle cut into them so that you can see that, oh, this is an envelope at the top. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm going through and just cutting out a half circle on those envelopes that don't have flaps. And like I said, eventually I do go through and do that on the ones that have flaps because it just, I don't know, I just felt like that they needed it too. So you'll see that. So that's 2 signatures, and then here's the third one that I put together. And trimming again a little bit off of that inside flap to make sure that there's plenty of room there for those. And it looks like both of these envelopes have flaps in this signature, so I'm just trimming just a little bit of extra off the inside of those. Nope, I guess that one I decided was easier just to cut off the flap because again it was kind of thin, so I thought it'd be easier to do that. And then trimming the other one that's in there. So that's number 3. So that's the 3 signatures, and like I said, there'll be several videos on this, putting this together. The next one you'll see me painting the cover, and then sewing the next one after that, sewing in the signatures. The next one after that is adding more interactive elements and pockets. So I hope to see you next time. Bye bye.